without further ado, we can go ahead and get started.
Hell yeah.
Today, I am joined by singer, songwriter, producer, and TikTok star, Thayer
TikTok
Period.
guy.
Thank you
Hello.
so much
That's
for
me.
being here. And
It's my pleasure. My
I just
pleasure.
want to jump right into it. So early on, you have kind of developed this glossy and experimental pop sound that later transforms into songs like Paranoid and Attic from a couple years back, with a very electric sound that is incredibly uncompromising. So I guess what has been the loose process of developing such a unique sound that you can call your own over the years?
I would say I don't have a very unfortunately I don't have a very good easy to replicate answer. I would say the main defining thing about the aesthetic of my music, which is very it's not really something, it's hard to pin it down because it changes so much, is it's really just whatever is exciting me at the moment. I really am someone who I kind of just follow, like, whenever I'll like start on something and then I'll just mess around. And if I do something weird and it sounds cool, I'm like, cool. This is what excites me and makes me want to create. So I will 100% follow that. And that can manifest in so many different ways, And it's really, I think it's kind of weird to not have a certain sound define what my music is, but it's really like me, I am the focal point
Yeah.
of all my music. Like, I am the common denominator, even though it's like that's not something you can necessarily like distill that down into a certain
Yeah.
like sound or aesthetic. It's really like whatever is like inspired. Like, even right now I'm always working very far ahead on projects. Like, I tend to have at least like an album or two in the works at any given time. Like, I have like a finished album right now and then another one that I'm working on. But the one I'm working on now is like full dubstep fusion. Like, every song has like a dubstep section, and it's like, what? How does this connect at all to anything I'm releasing right now? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's just like what's exciting to me.
Yeah.
So I would say kind of just like whatever like gets my brain going, and I'm like, oh, cool. That's like what inspires me to make stuff.
Nice. The sound and aesthetic just is you. Like that's
Yeah, exactly.
that's all it is.
Which is like such a kind of a non-answer though, because it's like, how do you it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, how do you define, what is Thayer? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, a very abstract question, I guess.
No, it's a
Um,
great question. And I don't know. I think it's a very honest approach to take to making
I
music
agree.
as well. Like, I think following kind of, what excites you is really the best you can do it. Like, just make whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, exactly.
If people like that, then heck yeah.
That's just like
If
an
they
added
don't vibe with that-
bonus.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think I would be making music if it wasn't something I would just genuinely enjoy doing.
That's good. And so, I would say over that time period, it's like you said, you had this experimental pop music, you have a lot of electronic influence, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
there's a lot of dubstep stuff that you've done in the past. This sort of like processed, experimental, and very, I guess, modern sound, has that kind of always, sort of been the route that you've taken, or if in the past, maybe have you ventured down other sounds and styles that we don't really hear much of in your public work?
Yeah. I mean, if we really break down the entire history of Thayer Period and everything I've ever been doing, I'm 23 right now, and I started producing when I was 15. So it's been
Nice.
almost a decade, which is insane to think about, and I feel so old now. Especially seeing all these kids nowadays blowing up, and they're, it's always the 16, 17-year-old kids
Yeah,
are always the ones
yeah.
like on the forefront of whatever the cool stuff. So it's like, oh wow, I gotta really, work hard to stay on top of
Yeah, it's like,
sounding.
wow, I feel like I'm
current.
behind in some way.
Exactly. Which then there's never pressure, like what's
Yeah.
like what Kanye was like in his late 20s when he there's
People
no,
cite
there's no stress there.
2 Chains a lot. People cite 2 Chains a lot as like the success story at an older age.
Exactly. So it's like, listen, it's never too old to get to, do whatever you want to do. I started actually making dubstep, like,
Okay.
originally. Like, electronic music, like, the way that I got into making music was I was in, like, 6th and 7th grade in middle school, listening to, like, Monster Cat, and it was, like, this, like, house music, like, EDM, dubstep, and I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. And I was like, I really want to make this. And then I found FL Studio, and I was like, what? I can just make music? And so I started there. And, I took production lessons at our local guitar center. There was a very nice guy there who taught production lessons, and I would like show him dubstep songs and like, how do they do this? And he was like mainly like a instrumental hip hop producer, so he's like, I don't know, but we're gonna try to figure it out. So we would just look up YouTube tutorials and stuff on like how to use, and like Serum, like that's when I got Serum, like in 2015, because I was like, oh, this is the thing the dubstep people are using. So like I started making dubstep and electronic music, and then I did that for a good chunk of time, like almost 3 years probably,
Hmm.
until I was like 18, senior in high school. And then I found Brockhampton. I was like, whoa, this is cool. Like this like scratches that same thing in my brain
Yeah.
that dubstep scratches, but there's also vocals. Okay, this is kind of cool. And then that's when I also, because I'd always kind of been into like hip hop a bit,
Yeah.
but it was definitely like a secondary thing to me. And that's kind of when my taste started to really shift to be more vocal slash hip hop inspired than the electronic side.
Yeah.
And then I also found Tyler the Creator at a similar time, and so both of those I was like, yo, this is cool. And I'm 18, and I feel really emo, so I made a
Nice.
bunch of just like really bad emo rap that is all private and impossible to find. I've wiped it off the internet. But that's when I was like, I really want to try my hand at like more like hip hop inspired production.
Yeah.
And then I think over time through that, that's when I kind of started leaning in like the Thayer period direction. And I think also it felt nice to put my voice into it as well, because I felt like it was a bit more of an expression of me. Because
Yeah.
instrumental music, I love instrumental music, but I think sometimes it's a little hard to connect it to a person in a way. Like humans just recognize the human voice so easily.
Yeah.
So it's like being able to kind of put your voice on a song is like, okay, it makes it feel like a little bit more like you.
Yeah. I mean, they accomplish different things.
Definitely,
I would
definitely.
say.
And I mean, some of my favorite music is instrumental. So, and like, listen, I made dubstep for like 3 years. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
most of that didn't have vocals. Like, and it's still, it totally can elicit emotions. But I think it just felt nice to have like a outlet for that, and like to be able to put lyrics and stuff down.
Yeah.
Even though I suck at rapping and
It's
writing.
okay.
But
I think it's really
what you were
interesting. I was gonna say I think it's really interesting that you bring up taking production lessons at the Guitar Center where you live, because I also know, speaking of just like lessons and formal training, I know that you also lived overseas to study music as well.
Yes, I did.
And I think that's an interesting perspective, because I mean, I guess the question is, how has a formal education on music and engineering
that
sort
is the
of
question.
How has that formal education in a rather DIY scene impacted how you view production and songwriting comparatively to like before you had that formal education?
I would say my stance. This is a question I actually get quite often. Like lots of people will message me about this and ask, because I think it's a very good question, because going to college it's a lot of money, and my stance on this, and this is also what I was told as a 16-year-old at the Guitar Center by my teacher, was I was telling him I was thinking of going to school for it. Like when I was 16, I was like, oh yeah, like when I go to college, I think I want to study music production. He's like, I don't think you need to do that. He's like, I think you are going to learn everything you need to know from me. And it's like, unless you really want to go, then don't go. And I was like, okay, we'll see. And I would say college was a wonderful experience. I met a lot of cool people. I made a lot of good connections as well. And I think school can really excel at that. I think the social setting is really nice. And I think you can also learn a lot of things that you don't really know you don't know. If that makes sense. Like I learned how to use a mixing console. Like I probably would not have learned how to do that outside of school. I learned how to do like audio forensics, which is like, oh, that's really cool. And I didn't even know that was a thing before I went to school.
That sounds incredibly interesting.
It's very cool. We like took like low quality phone calls and like used technology to like restore the audio. It's
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was pretty sick. Well, that's the thing. It was like it was a bunch of fun. Like I really enjoyed it, but I would say it is not at all essential. I firmly state that I think my entire career up to this point has not at all been impacted by my schooling. Like I don't think
that's
me going to school, I would say it did not. I could, like, if I had not gone to college, I would have been able to do everything I'm doing right now, the exact same.
I think it's interesting.
And I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you were saying.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it's interesting that you say that, because I went to college for video production.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already been using Premiere Pro for like 5 years before that. And I think the biggest thing that going to college for an already existing interest showed me is it showed me how to streamline my process with things I already knew how to do. So I think it's interesting that you say that like the schooling really hasn't had that much of an impact.
Yeah, I would say if anything, it kind of cemented the fact that it cemented my confidence in myself, I would say, with it. But I would say definitely it's like something that I would recommend if you have the resources and the time and the interest. Like I don't think it was not a bad experience in any way. I really enjoyed it, but it is not essential at
Okay.
all, I would say. And it's not the kind of thing I think where if it's going to put you in a really bad position financially or time wise, like if you have other commitments,
Not worth it.
I don't think it's worth it. I don't
Okay.
think it's worth getting into a bunch of debt.
That's
And I went to
fair.
school in England as well, where school is way cheaper than in the U.S. Like my entire degree, I have a brother who goes to school in the States, and
Mhm.
like my entire degree cost less than 1 year of his
Wow.
schooling, which is insane. And it's like it was only 3 years too for a bachelor's program. So like it was like
That's crazy.
I cheap, fast. It was a good time. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's something that anyone needs to really feel forced to do. I think you can. There are so many free resources online, and you can learn to do most things just by, if you have initiative. I think you can totally do it. Because I mean, that's how I learned to do 99% of what I do.
Yeah.
That's messing around for years and having fun with it, and
Yeah.
like, yeah.
So now that we kind of have a bit of a timeline of things, I'm glad
Yeah.
that we've established one. You have dubstep
Yes.
for like 3 years. Then
Yeah,
you're
going crazy.
being introduced to more hip hop influences
Yeah.
and
I found
artists.
Drain Gang in
Drain
2019. That was
Gang.
a very pivotal
Oh,
moment in
trust
my
me,
career,
I have
I
some
would say.
questions related to that. Don't you worry.
Okay,
Um,
that's good. I would
but
not exist without that.
and we
So.
kind of touched it on a little bit, saying that was like, saying this kind of point in time where you finally feel like you're making what is kind of now Thayer period
Yeah.
today, because you're
Yeah.
a bit of a one-man show with every step of the process. You're
I am.
producing, you are writing, you are engineering everything that you do. At what point, maybe it's with a song or a project or sort of a goal, at what point do you feel like, I have finally made something that is mine, that I can call my
Hmm.
own?
That's a very good question. I mean, I
Thank
think.
you.
Yeah, I listen. I gotta give you your props. You're very good at your job. You're good at coming up with questions. That's a tricky one. I'm trying to think. I would say. I mean, I don't know. It's really funny because I've kind of always. I think the way that I make stuff is very kind of unique to me
Yeah.
because it's really the only way I know how to do it. Is since
Okay.
came from a producing background, and then I switched to vocals like 3 or 4 years in. Also, I went to choir in high school. Not went to. I did choir in high school. I didn't
Okay.
mention that.
Okay.
But I did choir for like 5 years. So like I did have a background in singing, but not in the way that I do.
Yeah.
now. But like a more traditional background. But I think since I kind of came from the perspective of like producing is that thing that like gives me purpose and makes me happy and like brings me joy, I've kind of always been like, okay. And that's how I normally start most things as well. Like I start making sounds and then there's like make some kind of instrumental, then I record on it and then I start doing more production around that and then I change it around a bit. But I think the whole process is so wholly me because that's really the only way I know how to do it. But I mean, I think in a wider perspective, I mean, I don't know. I think that kind of as soon as you insert any part of yourself into something, it becomes like, an
It's already
expression of
you.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think like that, like, not doing everything doesn't make it a less valid creative expression of yourself, and I think that's fully true for people who just produce beats as well,
Yeah.
like instrumentals for artists. Like I think producers nowadays get, I think, a lot more credit than they used to, which I think is amazing.
It's
and
fantastic.
It's been really nice seeing the growth of like, I guess just like producers being treated as cool as artists, like Benny X, like people like that, like they're superstars now.
Yeah.
And like 10 years ago, it was not like that. I mean, unless you were like a Timbaland or something. But like,
I mean,
it's
yeah.
very cool that producers they're starting to have household names. I think that's a really cool like step forwards in the right direction.
Yeah, that's like any album you hear, that's the foundation. That's
Exactly, yeah. Listen, I mean, it's the
not
classic.
not exactly, but it's half the work,
No, 100%. And it's like the classic, I feel like I've seen this on Twitter a million times whenever it comes to people being like, oh, producers don't deserve 50%, they only deserve 10%. It's like, okay, people listen to instrumental music. People do not listen to acapella music. People do not listen to acapella.
Oh, first of all, that is a fantastic point that I had not thought
Yeah.
about. But you're seeing takes where people are saying 10%?
It's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. It's really, I think, unfortunately, there's still very much a battle being fought about producers getting taken advantage of, because I think it very much tends to be a field where artists have all the clout, and so the producer is trying to work with these artists, and then the artists
Yeah.
know they can take advantage of the producers because
Exactly.
they're like, hey, listen, I'm your payday. If I use your thing, then you don't have really any rights to negotiate.
Or at the
You
end
know,
of the day, it's like ripping beats and the producer
yeah.
fighting for like a claim over that song,
Yeah, exactly.
or
Sometimes
like
for like months
DSP.
after they're out, and
Yeah,
like it's so hard for people to like, people don't want to lawyer up. Like it's such a
no,
pain in
it's
the
a
butt.
process.
Yeah, it's really it's very unfortunate.
One of my biggest pet
But
peeves is listening to a song on SoundCloud and the there be no production credit.
I know it's ridiculous.
It's like,
It's
come
very
on,
ridiculous.
it's just a little bit in the title. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah, I know it's very because it's really not too much to ask. I don't
No, it's
think.
not.
But, definitely
um,
but it's getting
and
better though. It's definitely getting
I do agree with that for sure. I mentioned earlier in my little introduction for you that you're a bit of a TikTok superstar.
a little bit of
You
a
have
TikTok guy.
you have amassed a sizable TikTok following
That is true.
with your beat remakes, your production tips,
Mhm.
and your serum presets as well.
That's
In your
serum
opinion,
presets.
what is the difference between marketing your own art and then marketing your creativity as a service for people to directly pay for, like maybe with your Patreon, for example? And I suppose, where do you draw the line between the two?
That's a very good question.
Thank
I
you.
would say there definitely is a line in my head between the two. A line that I'm actually trying to get rid of currently.
Okay.
Because I think it's become a bit of a handicap in a way where I very much when I started was like, okay, the Patreon thing, the TikTok thing, this is like my livelihood. Like this is amazing. Like I feel really great and I don't want to jeopardize this by trying to insert my artistic side onto this. So I'm going to try to keep them very
Oh,
separate because
okay.
I don't want to upset or it's such a stupid. I think even saying it out loud sounds
Well,
dumb, but
but
like
I understand the
I don't
perspective,
I
though.
don't I don't want to I don't want to potentially ruin that thing, the Patreon thing, by trying to like make it too much of my artistic thing. So I think for a long time I felt a kind of feeling like, oh, I should just be happy with what I have and I shouldn't
Yeah.
try to promote. And occasionally I would promote on there, etc., and try to like make it a thing. But I knew that's like why people not why people were there. And so it
Yeah.
felt kind of like shoving something in people's face that they didn't want.
You're like
Even though
shoehorning
it
your
is
own art in.
exactly, but that's the thing. It's so silly, right? It's like,
Yeah.
why do I feel bad for showing my art? And it's, you can't like, you're not forced. I'm not forcing anyone to listen to anything. And I've
Exactly.
actually very recently been trying to break down those boundaries more and kind of
Hmm.
change the perspective. I actually recently started a series on TikTok, which I'm enjoying quite a bit, called Thayer Makes Music 2, where I take remakes and then I flip them into originals.
Oh, okay.
Uh, yeah, so I've been doing
I
that
think I saw
like
the Roblox TikTok.
yes, yeah, the one I just posted earlier. Yep. Yeah, but that's been fun, and I think it's been kind of helping people realize that I am also an artist. And that's the thing, though, is the remakes are, I mean, it's a bit more of a blurry line with
Yeah.
it being an expression of my artisticness, but it, at the end of the day, it all does come from me. So
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, my entire YouTube channel is essentially promoting other people's music at the end of the
Mhm.
day. And I feel weird about like promoting my own. I'm like, I
I
don't
think
want to
there's
like.
such a weird universal guilt for I think artists like
I
nowadays
agree.
in talking about their own art. I think there's unless you really like build I don't know. I think especially people who have secondary things that they do that are even like super closely related to what they do, like your channel. Like, it's all about music. Like
Yeah.
it's all about music. So it's like why was it weird for you to also,
Exactly.
it's just
Why is
another
it?
expression of your love for music. So why would
Yeah.
it feel weird? Why should it feel weird for you to talk about music on there? But there's that like feeling of like, oh,
Well,
I
I
don't
think
know.
you put it. I think you described it in a pretty succinct way in the fact that you feel like it's like, oh, that's not what they're here for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
I
like,
gotta
why?
stay hydrated.
Oh no, you're. I mean, I got a little tea on me. I get
Oh,
it.
nice,
I get
nice.
it.
I gotta have my tea
But
game.
I want to dive a little bit into Chasing Glory, your most recent project. But before we get into that, because I think I have some fairly in-depth questions about it. I'm going to go through just a couple very simple questions
Yeah,
that are a little more lighthearted.
amazing.
So the first of those would be, what was it like to see a review for Would You Trade Your Hands for Wings in the Vermont 7 Days newspaper?
That was a very cool feeling, and I think I was very much like this could go one of two ways
Okay.
because it's a weird album, and I think it's kind of the thing where it's like you either get it and you think it's cool, or you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. What is this guy doing? So like seeing a review was like a very much like, okay, cool. Am I about to get roasted on a spit and like told to never touch a DAW again, or are they gonna be like, this is cool? So I
It
think
was a glowing
I
review too.
it was really great. It really made me feel seen, I would say. And I
Yeah.
think I've been getting a lot more of that recently in the last, I'd say like year and a half. Is like people kind of understanding what I'm doing. Not to say that what I'm doing is super, not like it's not been done before. Because,
Yeah.
all music is like everything's been done before.
Yeah.
But I think seeing people who like understand it and enjoy it, like that's a really, really cool
Yeah, they're like getting
feeling.
it the way you want them to.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, I put myself into this, but it's weird and messy. But you see that and you think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
It's not like this is pushing you away. It's like, oh, cool. It's like in a way, like, oh, they see me and they understand me. And it's like, oh, that's a really nice feeling knowing that there's people out there. I
Yeah.
don't know. Because I mean, how much of art is people just being like, hey, I'm here. I exist. This is how I feel.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I make spoken word. That's pretty much all I do.
Exactly. It's like, just like, listen, I exist and here.
Yeah,
Acknowledge me.
yeah, someone, I mean, listen if you want.
Yeah, no, exactly.
My second question of these little short ones is, what would you consider the seminal tracks of the dubstep genre?
Oh, this. Oh my
Like
God.
foundational seminal tracks from the progenitors of the genre.
I'm gonna give my like peak when I was like. This is my like 2012, 2013 answers.
Yeah,
Because
I want to hear.
dubstep
I
is
want to
like
hear like
such a
16-year-old
it's
there.
such a long history. Like there's like the old like originating from like dub like Jamaican dub music, then getting connected with drum and bass in England. Like it has such a long history.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Everyone should go research that if they're interested. But I would say for me, being in that scene at that time, I would say Skrillex is still one of the like most goated, and his new stuff is good as well. I would
Yeah.
definitely say one of my probably like Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites.
That's a classic.
Classic. Yeah. I'd say probably something like Bass Cannon by like Flux Pavilion.
Okay. Okay.
Um, there's so many things that have like fallen through the cracks. I probably could have given you like so much of a better
That's
answer
fair.
like six years ago. But I'm trying to think.
When I was in high school, I did not listen to dubstep really. Didn't I
Missing
didn't
out.
I didn't hate it, but I didn't really listen to it.
Yeah.
But Animals by Martin Garrix.
Yeah,
That
that's
song.
a classic. Yeah, Big Room, and
I-
he's still doing stuff.
I
I think.
ripped-
He's like kind of like a pop producer now.
Oh
though.
really? I ripped
think.
that song
Yeah.
off of like an MP3 website.
Amazing. That's the optimal way to enjoy it, I think.
It was the only
Not gonna
dubstep song
lie.
I had on my entire phone. But I was like, this is
Is
the
it-
shit, dude.
No, I mean, and when you find one that connects with you, it's like it's a cool feeling,
Yeah.
I think that's also, I think, very much like that's when the like my inspiration for like the art of sound design, I think, peaked as well. 'Cause I'm like, whoa, these are some really weird, messed up noises. How are people making this? And then when you make your first like crappy dubstep bass, you're like, oh my god, I just made this
You're
crazy
enlightened.
sound. Yeah, it's like, what? I did this? Like, and yeah, it's definitely okay. I gotta think though. I'd say. Like I remember. I mean, I can definitely give you some artists. I feel like that. I
Oh
would
yeah,
say
for
were,
sure.
like, a
Whatever you want to
pivotal-
do.
Let's say like Barely Alive, Zomboy, Schism, Eptic, yeah, Skrillex, Caspa. Those are probably the ones I would go with.
That's
I
fair.
would say.
All right. And moving on, keeping on the
Yeah.
topic of influence, how would you say we're bringing it back? How would you say that Drain Gang and also let's throw in Chief Keef as well. How would you say
Oh,
they have
heck yeah.
they have impacted what you believe to be possible with music?
I would say that I had an enlightenment when I found
Wow.
Drain Gang. It was like, I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this like a week ago, which is really funny. So I have a pretty good way of describing it. But the first time that I heard like Young Lean and Blade, I felt like sonically, like, this is insane and I love this. Like the way their producers do melodies and stuff, and the way they like rap and stuff is like really interesting. But I also just felt really seen. When I
Okay.
listened to it, I felt like I had not really ever connected with music that much. Like I'd never listened to music that was like, understood me to that extent before. Like I listened to that music and I was like, oh, he gets it. Like he understands.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the best way that I can describe it, is that when I found that music, I was like, cool, this is like, I think this is going to be the thing that I like the most for the
This
rest
is
of
my
my life.
new
And I was like
obsession.
19. I was like 19 listening to Yoshi City, like in my crappy, like Subaru Outback. And I was like,
Nice.
this is like the best thing I've ever heard. And then, I mean, still, like, they're some of my most listened to artists. But I think the question is, how did like change what music nowadays is like? Is that was the question?
I mean, that was a pretty good answer for that question, I would
Oh
say.
wait, no! But that was like a separate.
Okay,
that was
okay,
like how
okay.
they affected me. Oh, I guess yeah.
Okay, well, I
But
mean,
I would
the
say-
original question was, well, you know, how do they impact what you believed to be possible through music?
Yeah.
Like what you could do
Oh
with
yeah,
music.
yeah. I would say just kind of being like, oh cool, this is like sonically, this like ticks all the boxes in my head to what like lights my brain up, I would say.
Okay.
But I'm like a fake. I am a big Chief Keef fan, but I am like kind of a fake Chief Keef fan, as in
Wow.
found Chief Keef because I knew how big of an impact he had on Young Lean and Blade's music originally,
Okay.
and I knew that that was a really big thing. And I am a huge nerd about music, so when I know that my favorite guys were really inspired by this other guy, I was like, I gotta do my history. I gotta do my research.
Yeah.
So I made a TikTok on this, I think last year, but I spent like a 3-month period listening to every single Chief Keef song on Spotify, which is like over 800. I think there's over 800 of them
Wow.
on there. And then I made a playlist of all my favorites, and then those were like the ones that I liked. And there was
Dedication.
people. I said, in my opinion, there's a lot of filler tracks in his discography.
Fair.
Some people disagree with me, but I think of the 800 songs, probably like 10% are ones that I enjoy.
I think when you reach a discography of that size,
Yeah.
that's just kind of like inevitable. That's bound to happen.
Yeah, listen, Lil B, not every Lil B song can be Rap God. Not Rap God. What's the one
Rap
with
God?
Chris Casino? Rap God's an Eminem song.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no. What's it called?
Yeah, you're probably more familiar with Lil B's discography than I am.
I'm not even a huge. Okay, I gotta. It's his big song, the one with Clamps Casino, the one that samples Imogen Heap. That song.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. But people will know what I'm talking about. I sound so bad for not knowing it. I love that song though. But yeah, I would say like 10% of Chief Keef's discography. But I would say listening back to Chief Keef, like his older stuff and his production especially, like that like blew my mind, because I was like, oh my god, this has all of the like, I don't know. I think music can be enjoyable for plenty of reasons. I think there can be an emotional connection of like, oh, this is beautiful and this makes me feel things, and then there can be like, oh, this goes really hard feeling.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And I think the thing that Chief Keef is amazing at doing is like blending those things, specifically like some of his producers like DP Beats, who else, like Akachi's really good at it, but I'd say DP is like, Young Chop is good at it as well, but like he has a couple producers where I would specifically look for tracks produced by those people, because I
Okay.
knew the way that they did their melodies and their drums and stuff. I was like, this is gonna probably like, I'm gonna probably really like this.
Yeah.
And so I would just like nerd out on that.
Hell yeah.
But I would say that he's just amazing at. He's also just such a like, I don't know. If you listen to Chief Keef's lyrics, like I feel like it's so funny. It's not funny to me, but like the way that like Finito and Don't Like and stuff are his most popular. Like he has so much good like emo music where he's just being really vulnerable and sad and singing with autotune over these like beautiful trap instrumentals, or even some just like acoustic stuff. And it's like, oh my god, like this makes me like cry. But it's like, that's not what people know him as. It's like, oh, he's this hype artist. But like, I think he's so much more, he has so much more depth to him than most people care. Like, don't even, they don't,
They just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, he's got such a big discography. But
Yeah.
I think like, he really like, I don't know, that sound really inspires me a lot. Like, I really want to make stuff that goes hard, but also makes you feel things.
Yeah,
You know?
like, but also, I mean, in a way, like something that goes hard and being able to get hyped to something, in a way that almost is like an emotional response.
No, exactly. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, not to discount that at all.
But so my final question. This is like the big interviewer asks an artist question. This is probably my most cliche episode, my cliche question of the interview. But right before we get into Chasing Glory, I gotta do it. What's your favorite tattoo you have? I know you have a couple ones that you're very, very happy with.
Yeah, I'm very shout out to Keenan Bouchard in Portland, Maine. He does most of my tattoos. He is a lovely, very cool, nice guy who is amazing at art. I just like him like, I have an idea for something. Can you do it? And he's like, yeah, I can do it. And then he just comes up with something. I'm like,
All
okay,
right.
this is amazing. Yeah, I love it. It's so easy for me. But I'd say my favorite tattoo I have is probably these deer on my arm. On my arms, on my arm. These deer on my arm.
There you go.
Because that was like the first tattoo that I got that was like visible all of the time, I would say. Like it was the first one that was like below the sleeves, not like under my shirt or like on my legs. And so I was like, oh my God, I can see this all the time. But it was just like a big thing. And I was like, this looks sick. And I really like deer and I really like the aesthetic of it. So I was like, oh, this is a really cool thing that is like very representative of me. And so I was like, oh, this is, I don't know, like, it's just a very cool feeling. Like, wow, this is like a piece of me that's like I only have this and everyone can see it. And it's like, oh, cool. I don't know. It's just something that's unique to me.
All right.
But there's not really a like meaning behind most of my tattoos.
That's
which
fair.
I mean, not that it's like, I don't think that that's a bad thing.
I mean, you don't need it. You don't need meaning.
Yeah, like I think most of them are like, oh yeah, I just think they look cool.
I mean, I got a moon tattooed on my arm just because I like the moon. That's it.
Exactly.
That's the only reason.
I just got a mongoose. It's upside down on my arm because I like mongoose.
Nice.
So
nice.
that's why. Yeah, I think honestly, just follow your heart with that. I don't think tattoos have to have meaning. But
Nah,
yeah, this one
I
was.
mean,
I
got a knife on my arm just
nice.
because
stabbing people. Right.
Well, that's the thing is like it's not even like a cool badass edgy thing. It's a Front Bottoms album cover, so it's like it's not even like a cool edgy knife. I like.
You could tell people it's because you like to stab people.
That's true. I hype it up to be something really kind of edgy.
Yeah, I got it after I stabbed them.
Yeah.
It's gonna get you demonetized. Can I say that?
No. I think it's fine. I don't think it'll.
That was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke. He doesn't actually stab people.
Do the in Minecraft excuse.
Yeah, he loves to stab people in Minecraft.
Somebody got arrested for that. They were like, but I said in Minecraft, and the cops were like, nah, that does not absolve you of anything.
Like you said you were. I'm not even gonna go there.
That's fair.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Chasing Glory, your most recent project. Mm-hmm. I would say that it's a ethereal trip. You have hyperpop, EDM, ambient influence, all sort of combining into a very unique project. And so, what is, I guess, the general background of the creation of the album, and how was the approach to making it unique and separate from your previous work?
I would definitely say it was a big step forward in terms of my vocal performance. I think I really went into it. I think my album before that, Would You Trade Your Hands for Wings, I really like it because it's kind of like an explosion. Like it sounds like it's like I think the equivalent of like, I don't know what it's called, but like scatter painting where you're just throwing stuff at the canvas.
Oh, like some Jackson Pollock stuff?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like there's so much stuff going on and it's not really cohesive and it's blowing, but it's really big and like there's a lot of stuff going on and I think there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to kind of, instead of going for the like over the top feeling, I really wanted to kind of go a lot more minimalist on this one and work on centering my voice as a part of the project instead of having it kind of be a background element.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of songs on Would You Trade Your Hands for Wings, I would not say that my favorite part of them is my vocal performance. I would say that I did vocals on a lot of them and I think I like them, but they're not like, oh, this is the thing that makes this song as cool as it is. Like Have Faith is not good in my opinion, or not amazing in my opinion because of my vocals on it. It's because there's like a killer like hyper pop dubstep drop that sounds like sick and like nothing I've ever heard before.
Yeah.
So for this project, I really wanted it to be like, okay, cool. The vocals are like the shining point. And I really like specifically made an effort to kind of try to strip back the production to leave room for the vocals and not have as many distractions.
Yeah, I'm really glad you bring that up because I have I do have a question that I'm interested in.
Oh yeah.
Specifically pertaining to that idea of vocals as words versus melody.
Like an instrument. Yeah,
because I know that you experiment with your vocals a lot, like you said.
Yeah.
And I particularly enjoy a lot of the vocal mixes on this project. I feel like this is like the projects where your vocals, like you said, take the forefront a lot. But then also on songs like Bloodlet, you do like have these super experimental approaches with your vocals. How do you think what's the difference between vocals being used to influence the production of a track and, making them more than just words versus what you're accomplishing more so on this project?
That is a really good question.
Thank you. I'm very glad you brought up the vocals because I was like, yes, this is what I want to know about.
Natural segue. I know. It's too easy. It has to kind of, there's not really a specific, I think it's kind of a barrier in people's head that they just need to get rid of themselves, Yeah. Like, I think for me, the way I create, like I said before, is I'll usually start an instrumental and then I'll record vocals over it. But then I will do more production on top of it and I'll mess with the vocals and I'll try new things. But the vocals very much become like they're baked into the song as opposed to being done in post. And I know a lot of people, I'll show like a video of me producing or something and the vocals will be in the track. They're like, why don't you just bounce out your instrumental and record on top of it? It's easier to mix.
Yeah.
I'm like, because it is a very essential part of my process. Like I will sometimes record vocals and then that will inspire more things production wise. But I mean, I think it really kind of comes down to your intention with that. I think you kind of need to know when you're recording, do you want to spotlight the vocals as kind of the main thing? Like, are you trying to bring emphasis to them or are you using them in like a more melodic sense as just like another instrument essentially? Yeah. I think it's kind of an abstract thing where it's hard to be like, this is this and this is this. I think it really does come down to kind of intention, but I think both are equally valid things. Yeah.
And like you said, on this project as opposed to the last one, the production is a little more reserved. It's a little more minimal, and you kind of lean a lot into these sort of ambient and sort of wispy sounds to give your vocals the highlight. But you still, despite this sort of like general cohesion, you do have a lot of range on it as well. You have these blown out and stuttering kicks on I Guess I Am Truly Alone, and then you have these super playful and whimsical melodies on When It Gets Dark Out. How do you think that unconventional structure and engineering can kind of help translate the emotion and motifs of your lyrics? How can that production reflect what you are saying?
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that you can do. I think you can definitely make subtle like things in your production to help kind of highlight your vocals and the feeling you're saying. I think that a lot of it kind of comes down to just like your heart and your brain. Like, I know, like, if I want something to feel really dramatic, I will turn the volume up a bunch and make it super distorted and have all this, like, really loud bass and, like, in, like, the final section of Bloodlet. It's like it kind of explodes. I'm like, okay, I want this to feel like this is a kind of like a moment of, like, release of, like, ah! And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make it really loud and explosive, And I think, like, if you want something to be more reserved, I think, you can do subtle things like cutting back elements in a track and making more room for your vocals. But I don't know. I think there's definitely tons of. I'd say it's kind of like just follow your intuition with that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like if you want vocals to sound more vulnerable and you are someone who tends to use a lot of autotune, like me, turning down the retune speed on your autotune to make them sound a little more natural. I think that can be a big, or like if you have a lot of like reverb on your vocals or like effects, like, take out all the kind of fancy stuff around your vocals and have them be very dry and upfront. It's like, oh, it feels like you're being like, instead of it's like, oh, fits in this track, it's like, oh, these are so like right in front of me, like it feels like I'm being spoken to directly, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I have one more question on the topic of Chasing Glory, and it's probably the most general or broad one. The album has a pretty trancy and otherworldly sound to it, but when analyzing the lyrics and listening to it, it's probably one of your most vulnerable and humanizing works to date. These lyrics depicting this sort of like way of living empathetically, introspection, and a little bit of desperation as well. So overall, generally, what do you hope that people, I guess, take away from this project?
I think Chasing Glory was a very selfish album.
Okay.
To make. And not in a way where I don't think it really caused any harm, but I think I made that album because I needed to make that album, if that makes sense. That album was me not really caring what anyone else wanted or what anyone else was thinking, and it was just like, I need to put everything inside of me into this right now as like a vessel of just dealing with kind of how I was feeling. And it's awesome that people connect with it. But it definitely, I mean, Can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked.
You're okay. You're okay. Just what do you hope people take away from it? Like, what? I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
this question has kind of changed a little bit now, knowing that this is kind of like in your mind, like this album is for you. Not really taking the opinions of others into consideration as much as you normally would. So yeah, I guess that kind of does change the tone of the question. But what
But
do
I
you
mean,
hope
I
people
can.
take away from it?
Yeah, I would say that whole album was kind of about self-betterment and kind of trying to become a better person and deal with things that are hard and kind of like realizing that like even though the pursuit of glory or whatever, in my mind, like such a title credits moment, but like chasing glory is like the pursuit of becoming a better version of you. Like you're
Hmm.
trying to, it's like the active, like the thing of working to be a better version and better yourself in whatever ways you want that to be, like physically, mentally, many different things.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to know that like it's not about obtaining glory and achieving glory. It's about the pursuit. The pursuit, if you're
Gotcha.
pursuing it, you're doing it right. If you're trying to get better, you're doing great. Like that's really all that matters. And
Yeah.
it's not about becoming this perfect version of you that doesn't even exist. Like I
Yeah.
think like I often like that was a whole big part of it too, is like I'm always trying to better myself in all these ways. I'm trying to do all this stuff to become a better version. It's like sometimes you get frustrated. You're like, am I ever gonna like achieve these things that I want to do? I'm working so hard. But it's like it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, because that's really what makes you who you are and really helps you have, I think, a fulfilling life. I think
Yeah.
if you're trying to move and do things and chase glory, like I think you're doing it right, and it just like it gets better too, it always gets better. I think kind of just hanging in there and just having listen, have faith in yourself. That's all I can say.
All right. Well,
But
Thayer,
yeah,
that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for your time and your
of
wonderful
course.
answers. What
Thank you.
to end off the interview, what can the people expect? What can they look forward to from Thayer Period?
Always working on a lot of music, I would say. I have an album that is mostly done. It's like weird Undertale inspired, like almost like synth wave, not synth wave, but like 80s synth stuff with much more pop vocals,
Okay.
more of a banger feeling than Chasing Glory. It's still very emotionally vulnerable, but I'm really excited to start talking about that. But that is probably going to come in the spring.
All
So be
right.
patient, enjoy the music that is out right now because I worked my butt off for it, and trying to do an album a year. I think it's a pretty good work pace.
Yeah.
But lots of TikToks on the way, lots of YouTube stuff,
Hell
maybe some music
yeah.
videos. Who knows? But
Well, thank you so much.
of course, thank you. My pleasure.